Welcome, dear dreamer. You found your way to Driftwood Stories, where the wind knows your name, the snow sings softly through the trees, and fairy tales unfold like petals in the hush of night. Tonight we drift into a tale old as frost and bright as moonlight, the story of a girl with skin like snow, lips like berries, and a heart untouched by envy. A tale of magic mirrors and quiet forests, of kindness that glows in the dark, of dwarfs with hands shaped by earth and eyes full of wisdom, of a queen whose hunger for beauty left her blind to the one truth that mattered most. So close your eyes, let the fire crackle low, let the candle flicker, and follow us gently into the snow-covered kingdom, where the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs begins. Chapter 1. A Mirror in the Castle. Long ago, in a kingdom where winter lingered long into spring, a queen sat by a high window, stitching in silence. Snowflakes drifted softly beyond the glass, swirling like little ghosts in the stillness. She pricked her finger. A bead of blood bloomed on her pale skin and fell upon the white linen in her lap. She looked out at the snow again and whispered, "If only I might have a child with skin as white as this snow, lips red as this blood, and hair dark as the window's ebony frame." And as old tales so often do, her wish was heard. That winter passed, and the queen gave birth to a daughter, just as she dreamed. Skin like snow, lips like rose petals, hair black as ravens' wings. The child cooed like bird song in the hush of the nursery, and they named her Snow White. But joy, like snow, does not linger. The queen grew pale with illness. Before spring's first thaw, she was gone. The king, though heavy-hearted, remarried before a full year had passed. The new queen was beautiful, dazzling, poised, and cold as a blade just drawn from ice. She carried with her a mirror, framed in gilded ivy, said to speak only truth, and each day she stood before it and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And always the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true. None in the land are fairer than you." Snow White grew in silence. She was gentle from the start, quiet and kind, soft-spoken, but never small. She walked barefoot through the palace gardens even in early frost, whispering to birds, rescuing beetles from ponds, gathering fallen petals and placing them gently upon her windowsill. The servants adored her, so did the people, and, perhaps worst of all, the mirror never mentioned her, not at first. But one day, when Snow White was just past her 7th year, and the queen asked the mirror her question, it paused, only a breath, but it was enough. The queen narrowed her eyes, and the next year the mirror replied, "You are fair, my queen, it's true, but Snow White's beauty now shines through." The queen did not scream, she did not cry. Her fury was the quiet kind, sharp as frost on glass, hidden as poison in perfume, She watched Snow White from that moment on. When the girl walked through the halls, the Queen's eyes followed. When she sang, the Queen stood just beyond the door, expression unreadable. When Snow White smiled, the Queen's lips did not move. And each night she asked the mirror, and each night the mirror answered, "Snow White, Snow White, Snow White." One morning the Queen summoned the royal huntsman. He was a quiet man, broad of shoulder, scarred by years in the woods. He had taught Snow White once how to track a fox without startling it. His hands were gentle, though stained with earth and blood. "You will take the girl," the Queen said, "into the forest." He nodded slowly. "You will not return with her." He looked up. "And you will bring me her heart." He said nothing, only bowed, and left with dread rising in his chest. That day Snow White wore a shawl of blue wool, the one with the tiny embroidered sparrows along the edge. She followed the huntsman into the woods without question. She liked the forest after all and trusted him. He had never looked at her with cruelty. They walked deep beneath the canopy, where the light flickered through branches and the moss muffled their steps. At last he stopped. She turned to him, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. He could not speak, could not draw his blade. Instead, he fell to one knee, tears brimming. "Run," he whispered. "Run and do not return." Snow White blinked. "But I cannot be your death," he said. "But if you stay, another will." So she ran, barefoot, heart pounding, through trees that seemed to close behind her, past roots like reaching fingers, past ravens that watched without blinking. She did not look back. She ran until her legs gave out, until the trees thinned, until only the hush of leaves remained. She had nothing, no food, no crown, no name, only her breath, only the echo of her heartbeat, only the beginning of a new tale, far from castle walls and closer to truth. Chapter 2. The Forest Beneath the Crown. Snow White did not know how long she wandered. The forest had no paths, only soft places where animals passed, where moss grew thick as blankets and the canopy blotted out all sense of sky. She slept curled in the crook of tree roots, the shawl around her shoulders damp with morning dew. She drank from streams, ate berries she recognized from books, careful not to take more than her hunger. The birds stayed close. A fox with white paws watched her for an afternoon, following at a distance like a flicker of thought. She did not cry, not often, not loudly. She only moved forward. And one day, after a long golden dusk, she found something that did not belong to the wild. A cottage, tucked into a hollow half hidden by ivy. Its roof sagged under moss, and its windows blinked like sleepy eyes. Smoke curled faintly from the crooked chimney, and the smell of herbs and warm bread drifted into the air. She approached slowly. The door was short, shorter than her shoulder, and the handle carved with 7 tiny runes. She knocked. No one answered. She knocked again. Still silence. So, trembling, she opened the door. Inside it was warm and cluttered. A hearth glowed softly. Pots of soup and spoons of various sizes lay scattered. There were 7 chairs, 7 mugs, 7 pairs of boots by the door, all in ascending size from tiny to not quite average. She took off her shoes, left them beside the smallest pair, and stepped inside. Snow White meant only to rest. She tidied the dishes. She swept the floor with a straw broom left by the hearth. She tasted the soup, just a spoonful, and added a pinch of thyme from the shelf. When the shadows lengthened and her legs wobbled beneath her, she climbed into the smallest bed and whispered, "Just for tonight." She fell asleep with the smell of herbs in her hair and a smile blooming soft across her lips. She did not wake until the door creaked open and 7 voices gasped. They were not what she expected. The dwarfs, for that is what they called themselves, were not all alike. One had wild hair like a dandelion gone to seed. One wore spectacles and muttered to himself in rhyme. One walked with a cane carved from antler, and one sang every word he spoke. They stood at the foot of her bed in wonder. The girl stirred, blinked, and sat upright. "Oh," she said softly, "I didn't mean—" "Did you clean the floor?" one asked. "Yes, "And the soup," said another. "You added thyme?" She nodded, uncertain. The one with the spectacles adjusted them. "Well," he said, "either she's a witch or a house guest, and I suppose we'll find out by morning." And that was how she stayed. The dwarfs lived by the rhythm of the earth. They mined by day, not just for gold, but for crystal, copper, and stone that sang beneath the pick. They returned by twilight with boots full of dust and pockets full of glitter. Snow White became part of that rhythm. She baked bread that didn't burn. She read aloud by firelight from old books left behind by wanderers. She planted herbs and named the birds that nested on the roof. She laughed, softly at first, then fully, freely. She never asked for protection. She never asked for pity. But the dwarfs, in their own ways, gave both. They carved her a bed from alder wood. They painted the shutters with her favourite wildflowers, and each night before sleep one would whisper, "You are safe now." Back in the castle, the queen still asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And the mirror, unblinking, replied, "You, my queen, are lovely still, but in a forest past the hill, where miners work and sparrows call, Snow White lives, the fairest of all." The queen went still. Her hands curled into fists. She did not scream, she did not rage, but her breath turned to ice, and her heart, never truly warm, grew colder still. She would not ask again. She would act, and this time she would go herself, disguised, determined, and deadly. Chapter 3. The Gifts of the Witch. The queen left the castle by night. No carriage, no attendants, Only a heavy cloak and a bundle of disguises wrapped in shadow. She had studied every herb, every charm, every poison whispered about in old books sealed with wax. The mirror had told her where, but it had not told her how. That she would decide, and so she became 3 different things: a peddler, a seamstress, a crone, and each would offer Snow White a gift. The first visit came just as the trees began to turn. Snow White had been gathering elderberries with one of the dwarfs, a quiet one with a crooked hat and a fondness for bees, when they saw her. A hunched figure at the edge of the path, pulling a cart of ribbons, laces, and combs. "Good morning, dear," the woman called. "Might I interest you in something lovely?" Snow White, ever gentle, stepped forward. "I've no coin," she said, but the old woman only smiled. Then a gift for such a pretty lass. She held up a lace bodice, silver-threaded and beautiful, like something from the castle halls. "Let me fit it to you." Snow White hesitated, but kindness had long been her compass, so she turned, arms raised, and the woman laced the bodice tighter, 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 until Snow White's breath fled her lips. She collapsed, eyes wide and still. The woman stepped back, triumphant, but she had not seen the dwarf behind the trees. He ran faster than his legs should carry him. By the time he reached the cottage, the others were already near the door. They followed without question. They found her cold, but not gone. With trembling hands they cut the laces loose, and Snow White gasped back to life. She wept, cradled in their arms, and asked, "Why would someone do such a thing?" They did not answer, but they knew. The Queen was not done. The second visit came with the frost. Snow White was alone, hanging garlands of pine above the hearth, when a woman knocked at the door. "Just an old comb, dear," she crooned, "to tame that wild hare." She looked different, younger perhaps, her eyes hidden behind a veil. Snow White shook her head. "I mustn't accept gifts." The woman frowned. "Not even a comb carved from bone wood and kissed by moonlight?" Snow White hesitated. It was beautiful, and bone wood was rare. She allowed the woman to place it in her hair, and as soon as it touched her scalp, pain, sharp and sudden. She cried out and collapsed, the comb gleaming like a fang among her curls. The woman vanished like smoke. This time it was the dwarf with the spectacles who returned first. He plucked the comb free, cursing softly, and again breath returned to Snow White's lips. She sat up, sobbing now. "I don't understand. She finds me every time." And the dwarf knelt before her, took her hands and said, "Then we shall not leave you alone again." They watched over her from that night forward. They sang while they mined, left guards behind, set silent bells to catch unwanted footsteps, but the Queen had waited too long. She would not stop at laces or combs. This time she brought fruit. The third visit came in the hush of winter. The Queen came cloaked as a crone, hunched and hollow-eyed, a basket of apples on her arm, one red, one white, one poison. The door was closed, the windows latched. The dwarfs were gone only minutes, but that was all it took. She knocked and sang, apples fresh and sweet and fine. Taste the red, the white divine. Snow White peeked from the curtain. You must go, she said. The crone smiled with crooked teeth. I'll eat one first. You eat the other. She took the white half, bit, chewed, smiled. Snow White, trusting still, longing for the taste of something remembered, took the red, bit once, and fell. Not gasping, not screaming, just gone. The dwarfs returned at sunset. The fire was cold, the hearth dark, and Snow White lay still upon the floor, a single bite taken from the red half of the apple still in her hand. They tried everything, tears, magic, song, but she did not wake. And at last they built her a bed of glass, not to trap her, but to keep her as she was, as they remembered. A girl of light, of snow, of stilled song. They placed her deep in the woods, where wild flowers grew even in frost, and they kept watch. For days, for weeks, for all the time they could. And in another kingdom, far from mirrors and queens, a young prince dreamed of a song he could not name. He followed it through fog, through forest, to a girl beneath glass, and a story just beginning to change. Chapter 4. The Glass and the Mountain. The forest grew quieter. Since Snow White had fallen, the trees seemed to breathe more slowly. Wind no longer stirred the canopy with song. The birds, once so eager to perch near the window-sill where she sang, kept their distance. Even the stream outside the cottage, always busy, always humming, ran slower, as if mourning with them. The dwarfs did not speak much. They moved as one, gently, reverently. They did not mine. They did not sing. They tended to her as though she still drew breath. They built her a coffin of glass and gold, not to entomb her, but to preserve her peace, to keep her beauty from decay, to protect her from the world that had failed her. They laid her in it with care, braiding her dark hair, folding her hands over her heart, and placing one wild flower, white with a single red petal, above her breast. She looks as if she sleeps, murmured the eldest dwarf. But she does not breathe, said another. She might, whispered the one who rhymed. One day, one dusk, or dawn. They carried her deep into the forest, to a place only the oldest among them remembered, a high clearing near the foot of a mountain, ringed by silver birch trees and guarded by hawthorn thickets. There, under the open sky, they set her down. They took turns keeping watch, one dwarf each day, and a different one each night. For seasons, for years perhaps, time began to feel different. The world turned without her. Rain fell, snow followed, flowers came and went. The dwarfs built a shelter beside her. grand, just enough to guard her when storms came. Animals passed through the glade, deer and fox, badgers and birds, all paused, all seemed to understand. The dwarfs noticed. Even the bear cubs do not growl, one whispered. Even the wolves do not howl, and in the coldest part of winter, a great owl perched above her glass coffin and blinked once, slowly, as if to say, "We are watching." Then came the prince, not as one expects, not in gleaming armour or with a fanfare of trumpets. He came quietly, on foot, with a cloak of faded blue and boots muddy from long travel. He had followed a feeling, a dream. For months he had wandered, seeking the voice he heard only in sleep, a voice that sang of water and longing, of light through leaves, and a name he did not yet know. He arrived at the edge of the glade as the sun set. The dwarf on watch saw him and did not speak. The prince stepped forward slowly, his breath caught in his throat. There she lay, pale as moonlight, still as snow, her lips still red, untouched by time, her hair spread like ink across the white lining of her glass chamber. He fell to his knees. "I've seen you," he whispered, "in every fire, every lake, every story told in quiet." He placed one hand to the glass, and the forest went silent, listening. The dwarf stepped closer. "She does not wake," the prince nodded. May I stay a while?" He did not ask for her, did not demand her release. He simply sat beside her as the light faded, humming softly the tune he had heard in dreams. That night he did not sleep, and neither did the forest. The next morning he rose with the sun and asked if he might carry her coffin down the mountain, to place her near his home, to protect her memory for the rest of his days. The dwarfs hesitated. "She is not meant for castles," said one. "She is not a monument," said another. But the eldest, who had watched the longest, nodded. He does not want to own her, only to honour her, and so they helped. They lifted the glass gently, carefully, and began to descend the winding forest path down toward the foothills where spring had already begun to thaw the ground. The prince walked beside them, hand always near, as though ready to catch her if the wind tried to steal her away. And then, at a bend in the trail, a root caught the heel of one dwarf. The glass coffin slipped, only a little, only an inch, but it was enough. Inside, Snow White jolted, only slightly. Her breath returned, sharp, sudden, startling. She coughed. The red apple dislodged from her throat, a single bite's worth, darkened with poison and time, and fell to the floor of the coffin with a soft, hollow sound. The dwarfs froze. The prince dropped to his knees. Snow White opened her eyes. She blinked, slowly, as if adjusting to the light, and then, hoarsely, "Where?" The forest exhaled. They laid her gently on a bed of moss beside the path, offering water, honey, silence. She drank, she wept, she remembered, not all at once, but in pieces. The queen, the apple, the voice at the door, and the faces of the dwarfs hovering above her now, filled with tears. "I dreamed I was asleep," she whispered. "And now you've awakened," said the prince. She turned to him, brow furrowed, curious. "And you?" "I followed a song," he said, "and found you." They smiled, not in romance, not yet, but in recognition, as though each had found something lost. Snow White did not return to the castle, not yet. Instead, she remained with the dwarfs until her strength returned. She braided their beards, they braided her hair. The prince visited often, not with gifts or words, but with wood to chop, stories to share, and hands ready to help. Only when winter turned again did she speak of returning. To see the mirror, she said, to speak the truth aloud. And they understood. She did not want vengeance. She wanted closure. Chapter 5, A Crown Made of Kindness. The castle had changed. Snow White saw it first from the hills, its turret still tall, its windows still gleaming. But the air around it no longer shimmered. The land was grey, the gardens unkept, the fountain by the gate, once brimming, now dry and silent. The queen still ruled, though the court had grown quiet. Whispers filled the halls, but no one dared speak truth aloud. Her beauty remained but brittle, like frost clinging to glass even as the sun rises. And still, every day, she asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And still the mirror answered, "Snow White, alive and breathing free, has kindness greater yet than thee." She shattered her chamber with the sound of her fury. But when she heard footsteps on the marble floor the next day, soft and sure, she did not turn. She knew who it was. Snow White entered the room alone. No crown, no guards, just her, cloaked in green, hair braided down her back, eyes clear. The queen turned slowly. "You live?" "I do." The silence stretched, full of thorns. "What have you come for?" the queen asked. "The crown? The mirror?" "I came to tell you," said Snow White, "that I forgive you." The queen blinked a breath, and then another. "Why?" Snow White's voice was soft. "Because I will not carry your hate any longer. I have too much love to tend, too much life." The queen stepped back. Her hands trembled. Her face, for the first time in years, cracked, not from age, but from grief. She turned to the mirror. "Then who am I?" The mirror, long silent to her soul, whispered, "You were beauty, you were hunger. You may still be something more." And with that, the queen sank into her chair. Snow White left her there, not defeated but unmasked. The court did not weep when she stepped down days later. The people watched as Snow White, not crowned by gold but by grace, stood at the castle steps and simply said, "I will serve, not rule. I will listen, not command. And I will build not walls, but windows." The prince came, not with fanfare, but with seeds. They planted a garden. The dwarfs were given rooms carved into the side of the western tower, but they spent most of their time in the hills, mining, singing, returning each spring with crystals and laughter. The kingdom slowly healed. Children ran freely again through the courtyards. Windows opened. The fountain flowed once more. Years later, when Snow White stood by the mirror, her hair streaked with silver and her face sun-softened with time, she asked only once, "Who am I?" And the mirror, now quiet and kind, replied, "You are the fairest still, but not for what the eye may see. You are the girl who ran, and the woman who stayed. You are the one who grew a garden where others left a gate." And she smiled, because no crown had ever suited her, but peace had, and love, and the soft hush of endings that sound like lullabies.